Welcome to the Oxford University Rocketry Society talk this week. Today we have Elisa Carcaillon. She works in business development at Loft, making space simple. And today you'll learn about what it's like to work in a space startup. Loft Orbital is based out of San Francisco, USA, and Toulouse, France, and they deploy space infrastructure as a service, providing rapid, reliable, and simplified access to space. They recently raised a Series B of 140 million, notably from BlackRock. And this talk, Elisa will allow you to discover more about what Loft Orbital is like, how it's changing the space industry, and she'll also tell you about her past experience in consulting in space, the space industry at PwC in Paris, and Airbus Defence and Space in Munich. Elisa graduated from CentraleSupélec and NEOMA Business School in engineering and business, respectively. This talk's really exciting for me because the space industry is something that touches everywhere in the world and has so much translational technology and has many benefits in agriculture, in transferable technology, and also just looking up to the sky and the stars and having the curiosity.
So as Zhen was saying, please, if you have any questions, just write them down and I'd be happy to answer any of the questions you may have at the end of this little section. So what Loft Orbital is, it's a French-US company. So we were born in the US in San Francisco back in 2017. And we have now 3 offices, one in San Francisco, one in Colorado, and another one in Toulouse. So we've been in Toulouse for now more than 2 years. So it's 2 different entities that we have between France and the US. And in France, we are focusing a lot on R&D, on development of software for both flight and ground technologies. We're doing a lot of system engineering as well. And we're doing the mission operations as well. Together with San Francisco. So San Francisco remains the headquarters of Loft Orbital, and we have, as I was saying, a big office in Colorado where we do the AIT, assembly, integration, and testing of our satellites. So as you mentioned, Zhen, we have done our Series B a couple of months ago for an amount of $140 million. And we're now we have a funding of about $200 million. So this funding has enabled us to grow pretty fast. When I joined Loft, we were less than 50 people, and we're now about 100 people between the US and France. So this was for the corporate aspect of Loft Orbital. So what we do at Loft, so you may have heard about us. So we are the first company providing a space infrastructure as a service. So concretely, what it means is that we want to offer our clients an access to space that is fast, reliable, and simple. So what it means is that we're taking care of all the complexity about dealing with a space mission, and we take this complexity for us, and we make access to space that is very simple for our customers so that they can focus on what matters the most to them, which is data, their mission, and their payload. So concretely, we fly the payloads of our customer. When the satellite is in orbit, we give them access to a mission control software so that they can operate their mission. And all of this has a service. So concretely, so the satellites we're flying on are microsatellites, about 150 kilograms. The payloads can be flown as a single payload or part of a constellation. So for example, this is something we're doing for Earth Daily, which is a company providing services for agriculture. Notably, it's a NEO constellation. And the microsatellites that we're using are all very reliable because they're all flight proven and they are high performance, which means that if you have a small payload, instead of being on a very small satellite, you're going to be on a microsat, benefiting from high power, high volume, and higher possibilities for the mass as well, for the data downlink, for many things that you can do on a microsatellite. So I would say that once the satellite is in orbit, we take care of the satellite operations. So we're using for this our software that is called Cockpit. So Cockpit is our mission control software that enables us to operate the satellites and our customers to operate their mission. So concretely, it's a software that was created to make an automation for the operations. So it's a software that was built and designed to be very easy to use. We're using some technologies that come from the tech world so that we have the best experience for our customers. And we completely abstract away all the complexity of spacecraft operation so that our customer, for example, they have a map and they say, okay, I want a picture of this area with this cloud coverage, and please, I'd like to have it in the next 40 hours or 20 hours. And we take care of everything for them. So at the same time, I'd say that they have the same flexibility as if they had their satellite, as if the satellite was theirs. So we really try to be very flexible here. And as regards to the service aspect, so it's a very fast and simple access to space, as I was saying. So the particularity of our business model is that we do as a service, and pure as a service means that our customers, they pay a certain amount before the launch, and the rest is paid on a subscription basis. So every month they're going to pay a certain amount depending on the complexity of the mission, depending on the resources that they're taking on the satellite. So we're really like switching CapEx to OpEx for our customer, which is very interesting from a financial perspective, especially for companies that are starting in the space world and that don't necessarily have all the capex to invest, all the capital to invest in a wholly dedicated team, a wholly dedicated infrastructure, and all of this service is meant to make our customers retain focus on what matters the most to them. So on the bottom of the slide, you can see like the integration, testing, and satellite integration and launch of one of our satellites that we've flown like back in 2021, in June 2021. We have two satellites now in orbit, YAM2 and YAM3, and they have been launched with Transporter-2 mission from SpaceX, which you can see on the slide. So this was for our business model. Maybe I can give you a word about how it works, because you're going to tell me, okay, Lisa, it's nice. You have like a microsatellite. It's 150 kilogram. It's very fast. But now you're going to tell me, how is this possible? So what is very unique and that is very special, I feel, about what we do at Loft is that we do not buy, we do not build the buses ourselves. We buy it to bus manufacturers, with bus manufacturers that have these buses that flew in the past. So we have the capacity to use buses with flight heritage, very strong flight heritage, which enables us to provide an access to space that is very reliable. Another thing that I think is interesting to underline is the fact that we're bringing standardization to the space industry. As you know, like the space industry, normally, like it's very haute couture, it's very customized. You have the bus that is customized and completely built around the payload. Here we have a completely different approach where we have a bus that is here, it's unchanged, it remains the same, but we have this payload hub, which is our Loft Universal interface, if I can say, that makes the interface between the payloads and the bus. So with the same bus, we're completely out of the critical path, and we can offer an access to space that is very reliable and fast, while being able to be very flexible for the accommodation of the different payloads. So we have this payload hub that does the interface in terms of thermal aspects, mechanical, data, power, and we can have inside this payload hub, which is, you have to imagine it's some kind of a box. Inside, we can put payloads for many different applications. So for example, for our first two satellites, we had 5 different customers on each. one for IoT, one for Earth observation, another one for a science application. So it's very different, and this flexibility that we offer to our customer is very unique. So all of this to say is that with this very unique approach, we offer an access to space that is fast, reliable, and very simple for our customers. So just to maybe finish on the business model of Loft is to maybe give you an understanding of what it can look like with one of our satellites. So here we have the customer payloads, and this is everything that the customer give us. We have the payload hub, which is everything that we design ourselves. We even have some capacity to have onboard processing, which is pretty interesting for the customers that just want to fly a software, for example. And when we combine the customer payloads and the payload hub, all together, they become the payload of the satellite. And at this stage, we do a first phase of tests, and then we integrate this integrated payload hub inside the bus, and then we do another series of tests, functional and environmental, and then we have the bus that is ready. So this was about Loft Orbital. I don't know if at this stage there are some questions, but I'd be happy to answer any of them.
Thank you for the for section 1 on Loft Orbital. When I first heard of Loft, it was because it was from one of your colleagues, Paul, who works as a back-end software engineer, and he told me about it, and he told me that things you build at Loft go into the SpaceX Falcon 9s, and they go into space, and that was just amazing to me. I was sitting in front of people who do that, right? So whilst some people put in any questions that they have for you, I thought I could ask one of myself as well. So what is it like to work at Loft, especially compared to other traditional space companies? And also afterwards, well, what it was like studying engineering and business, because you did both at university in France. So yeah.
Thanks a lot, Zhen, for these very interesting questions. Actually, working at Loft is just great. So I'd say that there are many reasons why working at Loft here is passioning. I would say the first one is that we have the benefit of a small company, so we have a lot of latitude, a lot of freedom. We are given a lot of responsibilities, and this I would say makes us very creative from a day-to-day basis, because you have the room for maneuver, and this I would say is really fantastic from like on a day-to-day basis. Another point maybe that makes also our life, and maybe as I'm talking here as BD, is the fact that when I started a year ago, when I was saying Loft Orbital, a lot of people in the space industry didn't know us. So it was pretty tough at the beginning, because you need to evangelize the people, make yourself like understood. We have we have a completely new business model. You know, when you see on the map and you want to put Loft Orbital on the map, it's not completely obvious, because we're not in the bus manufacturer, but at the same time we're a satellite operator, but we are providing a service that is also like above in the value chain. So there is a lot of education that we needed to do at the beginning, and now that we have done this Series B, and that we have these big contracts, notably with Earth Daily, we are partnering with Airbus for the buses I told you about. So we have one of the biggest companies in the space industry on Earth that works with us and provides us with the very high performance and highly reliable buses that are derivatives from the OneWeb platform. So I feel like this has enabled us also to gain knowledge and to be known in the space industry. In France, particularly, we're seen now as also one of the most innovative companies and most promising companies we're part of this prize that is called Next Gen here in France. So I'd say it's really like a consolidation of many different things that make us today well known in the space industry. And maybe I would finish by saying that what is great at Loft is the culture that we have here at Loft, which is pretty unique. We have some sort of a very unique mix between the technology, the tech industry and the space industry, a mix between like a multicultural mix as well, because we have a US French company with a lot of French people in the US and a lot of non-French people here in France. So I would say that we're a pretty unique company right now, and this is what makes also our lives very nice on a daily basis. And yes, to answer your second question about business and engineering, so you have seen that what we're selling here at Loft is some sort of some swap, so size, weight, and power on satellite, plus an experience of having a complete turnkey solution, turnkey service for our customers. So in order to be good in doing this job, you need to understand what are the technologies that we use, what are the needs of your customers, and everything about this most of the time is pretty technical. And if you do not have a layer of understanding of what is going on, well, it is very hard to sell. So I would say that it's not important for us as BD to be experts, but we are required to have a good understanding of pretty much a lot of different topics. May it be on the satellite systems per se, may it be on the satellite applications that we can have on IoT, on Earth observation, on like, I would say it's really like having a good culture, a good space culture, plus understanding what are the different technologies. So that's the reason why I did these double, like dual degree in both engineering and business. And yes, just to tell you a bit about my story, at the beginning I wanted to work in the defense industry, and I had done an internship at Naval Group back in 2015, and I was in marketing. And I was like, marketing is really cool, but I realized that without a technical layer, it would be very hard for me to really have a true and deep understanding of the different technologies of a submarine, or of a frigate. And back then I was like, okay, I really need to have this dual degree. So now you know everything.
I'm glad we know your whole life story now. No, I think it's really cool that you, when you're pitching Loft to any of the clients or customers, you know exactly what you're talking about, and you can talk about the components and how it helps the clients. And yes, as you said, since Loft is a startup, it it has the very startup feel, where it started off small, and you don't hear too much about it until it really goes big, and then it can affect the industry in a massive way. So yeah, it's really cool. Just before we go forward, just pause. I think there are no questions so far, so I think it'd be good to continue on the business development as well. Yeah, just well, for anyone who has questions, just put them in the chat as we go, and we'll get to them after. Yeah. Okay, take
Excellent.
it away, Lisa.
Yes. So on the business development aspect, my first question would have been, what is, according to you, the difference between business development and sales? But as we're doing it in a webinar aspect, it's always a bit more tricky to have people feedback. So it will be for you, Zhen. So what do you think are the difference between business development and sales? I don't know if you
It's a good
have
question.
any idea.
my guess is that um, business development includes sales as well, and then further on following through with the project, and then um, maybe bringing in some other players as well, because it's you're essentially like ride sharing, right? Um, so that's my guess. You'd bring in more people and then coordinate between different partners as well.
Mm, that's absolutely you're absolutely right. It's a very interesting aspect that you raised about ride sharing, because it's true that we have done a lot of ride sharing, but we do
Hmm.
also dedicated missions. So it requires also to have this capacity to know, okay, I know the swap available on this mission. I know this one will not fit. Okay, so it will be a dedicated, or it will be on another mission. So I would say that to complete your answer about sales, as you said, it's perfectly right. Sales is completely part of BD. Um, what I would say is the main difference between the two is really like there is one that has an holistic approach, which is the business development, and one that is more focused and more limited in time. In a sense that business development is really like the concept of trying to find opportunities and business opportunities to sell your product and your service. Whereas sales is more about, okay, I have this opportunity. Now it's the moment when I'm going to conclude. So sales, I would say it's a small part at the end of the business development cycle, even if after the sales, there are many different things that you have to take care about also. But I would say that business development is really like um, it takes more time in a sense, because it's not very concrete. You try, you explore, you discover, and once you have something very concrete, then you can go and we can call ourselves sales. And what is interesting is that in some companies, especially the big companies, you have a pretty distinction, like a pretty structured sales and business development department, where you have the business development, you have the salespeople, you have the people that are preparing for the bids, you have some people that are after sales. And here at Loft, we're doing pretty much everything, because we're a small team, we're a small company, so we have the chance to tackle many different subjects, and that's also what I feel is very interesting. And I can give you a bit more about what I do on what my objectives are as BD. And you will see at the bottom of the slide there is I talk about marketing, communication, PR, knowledge management, and I also talk about the fact that we help feed Loft Orbital's technology roadmap, because BD is also is not just about focusing on the sales. It's also about cultivating relationship, maintaining a pipeline of opportunities, and not just growing sales per se. And you can do this if you have a real and good understanding of what your customers want. So it gets back to the question that you were asking before, because it is important to understand the technical specifications of your customer, so that you have the chance to really take into account like everything that the customer wants. But of course, it's not just about the technical aspects. There are many other aspects that we have to take care about as BD when we're working on deals. And sometimes it can be like, of course, there is the financial aspect, there is sometimes it's some strategic aspects also. So there's many different things that make our life also even more passionate, because there's many different things that come into place. And what I feel also is interesting to underline is the fact that we work hand in hand with the technical team, so that we also try to really understand what we can do. But at the same time, it is important for us, BD, to let them know about the market, to have a sense of what the customers want, so that we can influence the product roadmap and the technology roadmap of Loft Orbital. And what I feel, and this is what I feel is also very interesting. And and yes, when I say support in marketing, communication, it's the beauty of small companies. Also, it's about having this capacity also to deal with many different aspects of the company that are very important. And what it's like to be BD at Loft. So I try to just come up with some verbs that are to me pretty much depicting what it is to work in BD. It's a lot about communication, a lot about convincing. Uh, you have to be bold also sometimes, and most of the time you have to be very flexible. And I feel that it is completely in line with our technologies that make us also very flexible in our approach as regards to our clients, thanks to the payload hub I told you about, and thanks to cockpit that has been designed to be very, very versatile and very, very easy to use, and to make it very scalable in a sense. And I'd say that it's about also being patient and never giving up, because as I was showing on the previous slide, you don't sail a satellite in 2 days. So yes, I would say that it is overall, I would say that as regards to the technical aspects, it's as I told you, in BD, we're not experts. So it's important to know what you're talking about, but it's important to know what are your limits as well. So it's about finding the right balance also between the two. And what I think is very interesting as business development, in business development, is to work with many different company teams inside the company. It can be the technical team, it can be embedded software team, it can be front end, back end for cockpit. It can be the SRE team sometime, and yes, it touches upon many different subjects, and that's what I feel makes the job also very interesting. So that was pretty much what I had to say about my job at Loft Orbital as business developer.
Thank you for that section. So Paul actually asked if BD is before sales during when you were talking, and I guess it's is it BD instead of sales, and then BD encompasses a larger job role?
Exactly. I would say that business developer is a bit like there is an analogy in French, but I don't want to say mistake in translating. But the BD is the person that goes on the market, goes to see many different clients, many different partners. It's important as BD to really understand what's the market looking like, the ecosystem per se, like globally speaking. Whereas the sales is where when you have like a very concrete deal, then you put your hat of a salesperson. But a BD person, when it is when this person is on a deal that is becoming very concrete, and that we enter this sales phase, I would say the BD person remains the BD person. It's just like the cycle, you know, like in the cycle, we are entering a new phase. So I would say that BD is most of the time at the beginning. And then when you have done your job as BD, well, normally at some point you have a deal that is becoming concrete. You are very close to signing a contract. And in that case, you are entering the sales phase. I don't know if that's clear.
So we actually had a couple questions from earlier that we didn't get to. We have two questions. For customers that use your services to test software in space, what kind of hardware do they require?
Very interesting question. So actually, this is not something I dig into the details, but I told you about this payload hub that we have. And inside the payload hub, I told you it would do the interface in terms of data, power, mechanical, thermal aspects. But there is also inside this payload hub different chips that we have that enable our customers to do onboard processing and to run their software. So it can be different types of chips. I'm not going to dig into the details, but it can be FPGA for very strong and powerful calculations. It can be GPUs for some AI algorithms. It can be CPUs if it's enough. We can have AI accelerators as well. So it's many different chips that we're using, and it really depends on the need of our customer. And if I can just add one point that I did not underline is the fact that what is very interesting is that right now we have these satellites. We have many different payloads inside the satellite. We have RF capabilities, we have GNSS receivers, we have EO sensors. And when these assets are not used, what is interesting is that we can put this asset um, in the hands of another client, meaning that we are always optimizing and searching for the optimization of the space infrastructure. And that is the reason why we call ourselves space infrastructure as a service, is because not only do we integrate the payloads, but we also give access to these payloads to other customers. And the reason why I was underlining this is because if you have a machine learning algorithm and you want to test it in orbit, what is interesting for you is that you can have access to cameras that are already on the same satellite, so that you can do your onboard processing like cycle directly on board the satellite, and without having to upload dummy images and doing it with some data that has been uploaded from the ground. So I feel like this is something very unique about what we can offer, and you can do this in just a couple of weeks instead of having to plan for an entire mission. Here, it's really like time sharing. You want to test something, you have a software, we can train the algorithms on the ground and then upload them to the satellite. If the algorithms, we can directly upload them, we can upload them. If you have just the software, we can upload the software. So it's really like very flexible and very rapid access to space once again.
Yeah, it seems like it's just about how creative you can be with the components you have. And especially like the space infrastructure as a service model, because it's kind of a play on the SaaS business model that has been so gigantic in the last 20 years. Yeah. We have another question. It's from VJ. It says, "Hi Elisa, very fascinating to hear about your company. What is an example of something a customer would usually request to go up in their payload? Do you have the issue of stowaways looking for a free trip to space?" So I guess you could talk about maybe a little bit more about just what other clients that what they like to do, and how Loft helps, and how you help with that as well.
So I will give you just a hint about what are the different clients and the different applications we can have. But if you want, we have many different posts that we did on LinkedIn that give a hint on also the different applications and give you a good perspective on everything that we can do. So I would say that the payloads can be of different types. So as I was saying, can be physical or software payloads. So the advantage of flying with a microsat is that the number of kilograms that you can host is higher than one on a very small satellite. So we can have, like, for example, big telescopes, we can have big cameras, we can have, for example, like we're flying an entire in-orbit demonstration for the Canadian Space Agency and Honeywell. So concretely, we're helping them doing their IOD for QKD, for quantum key distribution. And what it means is that we are not like working on the payload, they are working on the payload, but they are putting their payload, if you want, in our satellite, and they can operate using their own mission control software, using and this is made possible because we have a big capacity on our satellites, and this is what they were looking for. And there are some experience and some missions that you cannot do on very small satellites. And as I was telling you, I think that this is what also is interesting in our model, is that whatever the size of your payload, if you have a big payload, You can put it, if you have a small one, you can put it as well. It's all about finding the right balance between all the payloads that are inside the satellite. So to answer your question, it can be for many different applications. So Earth observation, for example, we have hyperspectral cameras or multispectral cameras that we're flying. We can have applications for IoT. We can have some software that we can fly for increasing the accuracy of the positioning from a GNSS perspective. So I would say that the applications are very diverse, and the like on this, I would say that we try to be as creative as we can. And I feel like the fact that we're using software-defined radios and that a lot of our technologies are based on software make us also very flexible, in a sense that we can accommodate many different applications for many different clients.
That's great. So I have a couple other questions. So have customers and Loft Orbital been considering space debris? Because that's one of the big things in the media, and just one of the downsides actually and the reality of exploring space and putting things into space.
Absolutely. So at Loft, we take this very seriously. It's really increasingly a concern for us at Loft, and we know that collision avoidance is becoming more and more important. And this is the reason why we have collision avoidance that will become one of the feature of Cockpit, our mission control software that I told you about. And the reason why this is something that is possible is because we're going to have propulsion on our future satellites. So this will enable us to be more reactive and on the maneuvering aspects. So I would say that this would be a first answer to the question. It's about really like having the proper data for identification of conjunction, having the right information so that we can also do the maneuvering on time. And I would say that this is something that we are working on pretty hard right now. We know that there are many different projects at European level, notably with the EU SST program, that we are very much interested in. And there are many startups also that are trying to generate more and more data, either with ground segment or like sensors on the ground or sensors in space. So we think that it's great initiatives, and we're completely and we are even happy to host some of the space-based sensors on board our satellites, may it be telescopes, for example. So I think that we're greatly positioned to contribute positively to this effort. And I would say that another part of the answer is our model, as I was telling you, is about optimizing the space infrastructure. So in a sense, instead of having 5 different payloads that could be flying on 5 different satellites, and sometimes, it may be very small satellites. Well, here we say, okay, we take a big satellite, a microsatellite. We know that it has flight heritage. We know that it's reliable, so that when it's in space, it works well. And this is something that is very important also for us, because from our perspective, we are also trying in our way to participate also in the fact that, okay, we're launching a satellite, but we're going to have propulsion, and we're going to have also the way and the possibility to exploit the space infrastructure to the utmost, so that we do not just send satellites every day. So I would say that is our commitment here at Loft as regards to space debris.
That's good to hear. Just one last question before we move on to your consultancy experience. What is the goal of Loft Orbital, the 5 to 10 year vision, if you will?
Yes, so it's a very interesting question. So there is an analogy that we like to give when we talk about the vision of Loft is the model of Amazon, AWS, Amazon Web Services. So a bit like today, when you have some photos, you don't have necessarily your hard disk here storing all your data. You are like relying on the cloud. So you don't necessarily know the servers that you are using to store your data. You just know that it's here, and that's all you're asking for. And in a sense, this is a bit the vision that we want to bring in the space industry to say, you want to have your payload in orbit, you want to have it works, like you want you want this to work well, and you don't necessarily care about what bus it uses, what are the ground stations that had been used to communicate with the satellite. What you just want is to say, I want my image at the right time, with the right latency, with the right resolution, with the right levels and everything that I asked for. And this is a bit like what we want to bring in the space industry is to say, you don't have as a company, you want to access space. You don't want to deal with all the complexity that we discussed about insurance, licensing, dealing with the AIT, dealing with the launch. You just want to have something that works, and you want to have data so that you can make business. And this is exactly what we try to offer in the space industry. And I would say that another thing that is interesting also to underline is the scalability of our system. In a sense that tomorrow, if you need to have, for example, to run a software that requires a lot of computing capability, you're not going to invest in the big computer. You're going to be on a virtual machine, and you may have the capabilities that you need. And if tomorrow and after tomorrow you don't need it anymore, well, you haven't invested. So it's this way of saying, okay, instead of doing capex, you're spending on the opex side, and this is what makes the model very interesting for our customers. And I would say that this would be the first part of the answer. And the second part of the answer is basically saying, if you scale up our project, is to say in 2 years from now, we're going to have the first constellation of heterogeneous satellites that are shared between different clients and operated by Loft, and that can be tasked by anyone as long as you tell us what you want, what are the capabilities you want to access. And this is really like the vision of Loft, like to the utmost, is to say you have an entire constellation that you can task so that you can have access to space.
Fantastic. And I'm guessing the clients could be on the same bus. It could be between governments and companies and all on the same satellite.
Absolutely.
That's pretty cool. All right. Why don't you start with your next section?
Yeah. So I will give you a few words about consulting. So this is a meme I love a lot. I found it very, very, very cool to show. So it's of course it's a joke showing here that as a consultant, we are known as people that work a lot, and it is partially true. We work a lot, but there are different types of consulting, so it's not necessarily like every time the same. We say consulting, but behind there are many different types of consulting. So here I just want to put a waiver because it's a non-exhaustive listing. It's just my vision of the things. I'm not saying this is the source of truth, but it's just to give you an example and a vision of what are the different consulting aspects that you can have and types you can have. So on the strategy one, you may have heard about these companies: BCG, McKinsey, Bain. So so this type of strategy consulting is focusing on advising executives on many different aspects of their strategy. It can be on their business, on mergers and acquisitions. It can be on many different aspects. Most of the time, it's pretty short missions. It can be 3 months. Sometimes it's less. Sometimes it's more. Then you have the management consulting. So there are the big four inside. So you may have heard about PwC, Deloitte, EY, Accenture. So these are the management consulting. But once again, everything is very porous. It's not like, okay, PwC doesn't do strategy. Sometimes, you have some agencies that are in different sites, but it's just a very easy way to structure it. So management consulting can deal with finance, legal, operations, governance, dealing with the change in some companies, doing some HR sometimes. So it's really very diverse. It's more about, once the strategy has been designed or thought, then you have to implement it. And it's more about the execution of the strategy that is done in management consulting. And the length of the mission very much differs. Sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's a year, sometimes it can be longer. And then there is the IT consulting, which is more about advising companies on some technologies that they could implement. So it can be, for example, should I use this tool or this other tool, or what is the best for my company? And these consulting companies are usually experts, and they have a very thin expertise on some subjects, and it tends to be medium to long missions. But once again, it really depends. And the space practice of PwC, where I used to work, it's a bit of strategy and management. It falls like it sits between the two, I would say. So what being a consultant looks like. So the PwC space practice is a small team of about 15 people working exclusively on space topics. So basically, we would work on strategy assignments, for example, supporting some space companies in market sizing or market characterization. Sometimes we would support some banks or funding institutions in commercial due diligence. So it's the type of work that is more strategy, if you want. And then a second big part of our job was to do socioeconomic impact assessment. So I'm not sure if that rings a bell to everyone, but it's I'm going to give you an example. So for example, ESA, whenever they have a big program where they invest X million euros, they have to justify, in a sense, to their member states that all of this money invested had good impact and positive impact on their society, on their economics, on their industry, on their strategic aspects. And all of this is assessed via socioeconomic impact assessments. So you have notably one criteria or one KPI that is the GDP multiplier. So it means that for €1 that you put in this program, as Germany, for example, how many euro are you going to get back to your industry? And most of the time for space programs, it's more than €1 that you get on average. And sometimes you have GDP multipliers of 2 or 3. So it really depends. So that was the socioeconomic impact assessment. I wanted to explain what it is because otherwise it's not very clear. And yeah, so the clients, we had anchor customers that were ESA or the European Commission, with whom we had a framework contract. So we had a lot of work with them. It was very interesting. And we had also clients from all over the world, can be private or public. And most of the time it was space companies, but sometimes it was companies that were interested in investing in space or in buying some space data, or yes. So that was pretty diverse. It was very interesting. And the life of a consultant, I'd say it's a lot about reading, a lot about writing. And what is very interesting is to become knowledgeable on subjects that you had no clue about in just a couple of weeks or a couple of days sometimes. So it's really something that requires to have some kind of a funnel approach to say, okay, this is how it works. And as you go, as you move forward, you dig more into the details, and it's a very specific approach. It's not made for everyone, but it can be very interesting also to see. So we would do a lot of slides, a lot of reports, and I would say that what was very nice is that we had the chance to interact with a variety of people in a variety of sectors, and this was particularly interesting, I would say. And the output, in a sense, the skills that you can get outside, like after being a good consultant, I'd say it's becoming it's having good communication skills, both oral and written, having a very structured way of functioning, some kind of doing boxes every time that you do something. You really think about, okay, what are the messages that I want to deliver? How should I put it on a slide so that the person understand perfectly what I want to say? Try to storytell as much as we can. So I think these are interesting skills that can be useful after. And just to finish, I would say that it's the overall picture of the space industry that I found very interesting in working in the consulting space practice at PwC, because as I'm showing on this slide, I worked on a variety of space domains on the space value chain. So the space value chain can be segmented into three parts. So you have the upstream, which is about the production of satellites and production of launchers. Then you have the midstream, that is about the operation of the satellite, operation of the launcher. And then you have the downstream, that is all about using the space data. And just to give you an example on the missions that I could work on, so I told you about digging into subjects you had no clue about. This was completely the case when I worked on quantum communication. I arrived and I knew nothing about it. And I have to say it was pretty challenging, but it was very interesting to really understand what is the status quo here in Europe, what are the different programs, but mostly understand what are the technologies behind, what are the components, what are the subsystems that you need. And the point was really to understand what was the ecosystem here that we had in Europe for this quantum communication infrastructure. So that was passioning. I worked on the launchers as well. I worked on the lunar economy, trying to assess the market. And actually, if we have the opportunity to share the slides, you have access to the white paper on the PwC website if you want. I worked on ground segment as a service, which is pretty interesting because today at Loft, we are relying on ground segment as a service providers to communicate with our satellites. So I feel like it was an interesting subject I had to work on. I told you about the socioeconomic impact assessment. I told you about the framework contract we had with the European Commission, and we had the chance to work on precision agriculture with the European Commission to try to understand how to use space data to optimize the use of nutrients in Europe, in the European Union, for farmers. That was a very it was very challenging, but it was passioning as well. And I worked for many other different missions, but all of this to say that it gives you a big quite a big picture of the space and what's going on in the space industry and domain. So I feel that was very interesting as a whole. So yes, that's the end of my presentation, and I'd like to thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions as regards to what I just presented or subjects that I presented before, happy to.
Thank you so much, Elisa. That was very interesting. The part that you said about the socioeconomic analysis, I always find that part the most quite interesting and mind-boggling. That if you look at the economics of these things, like NASA ends up having something like a 10 to 13 multiplier, and don't quote me on that as well, but I remember seeing that number somewhere. And I mean, I wanted to hear about what motivates you to work in space and how you ended up at PwC and then how you ended up at Loft. I guess that's something that you can't find so easily online. Yeah.
No, but I will do my best to give you a hint in just a couple of minutes. But um, as I was telling you at the beginning, I was interested in the defense industry. I've been always in the aerospace industry, so I started in 2015 in defense. Then I did an internship in Airbus aircraft. So I I I, I was working in the asset management part of Airbus in Toulouse. And then I was looking for my second part for the gap year. I was looking for another internship, and by chance, I found myself in space. I didn't know anything about space. Like, I think that I really didn't even know what was geo, like what geo or Leo or Mio meant. I had no clue. So I have to say that I started from scratch. And actually, back in 2016, it was the beginning of the new space era. And I was then working at Airbus in Munich, and I had the chance to work on many different subjects that made me realize how much dynamic was the new space um, ecosystem. And I was looking at the number of constellations, trying to understand what the market would look like, and working on this, I realized how um, it was so enriching to work on all of these subjects. And I was like, this sector is so much moving and evolving. It's really the time to be there and to really gain more understanding of what is going on. And at the end of my internship, I had the chance to have a colleague of mine that told me about the PwC space practice. He knew a person there that is now a friend of mine, and I came to this PwC space practice where I spent 3 years, and this is where I gained the knowledge that I have today about the space industry. But I feel like working in Loft and working at Loft was where I really had the chance to have a concrete understanding of what it means to fly a satellite, the complexity of operating a satellite, the complexity of putting in all of the payloads. I mean, in the consulting, it was great because I could have an overall picture, but I was so far away of imagining how complex this is. And that's why I feel consulting is great, because it gives you like a many different good working approaches, good methodology. It's really like many skills that are very useful for the rest of your life, I feel. But it is true that I needed this concreteness and this, putting your hands in technicalities. This is what I was looking for. And um, and this is how I came up in Loft Orbital by chance. I knew someone that was working at Loft, and who told me about this job, and here I am. So I would say that to answer your first question, what I found great about working in the space industry is that it's so dynamic, it's so innovative. With this new space era, there are so many companies blowing, that are being born, and they are all offering something very new. And I feel like it's really like an ecosystem that is here, and more present here in Europe, and supported by government, still. But I feel like the private sector in the space industry is also gaining, and increasing as well. So I feel it's a great moment to be in the space industry. Not to mention all of the aspects about what space can bring to Earth, and how important it is from a sovereignty perspective. We have seen this Viasat satellites that have been hacked by the Russians during the war. So I feel like it's just like emphasizing how space is important for Earth and for humanity here.
Yeah, it's crazy. With one tweet, they managed to the Ukrainians managed to get Elon Musk to turn on Starlink for Ukraine,
Mm.
and you can see it's just dissemination of information, education, and communication uh, has is so vital to us
Mm,
today. Um, I wanted to
absolutely.
switch tracks and actually ask you about the quantum communication part because when you're working at PwC, what was how did you go about approaching learning something like that, and how did you know when you knew enough to be able to at least write something or talk to someone about it?
Mm,
And just before you
yeah.
answer, if anyone has any questions, just put them in the Q&A. We'll get to them.
Mm. So actually, it's an interesting point. I feel like when I first learned, when I heard that I would be on this mission, I was um, I was very excited because as I tell you, I knew nothing about it, and at some point, um, your curiosity is so big that you're excited every time there is something new. And then I started to so my first approach, and I think that every consultant will tell you that, is that at the beginning you want to read as much as you can on the subject, trying to have an understanding, very high level understanding of, okay, so what does it mean QCI, what it is a protocol, what is the quantum physics behind, what are, and actually at that time we started the study trying to understand the ecosystem and the status quo as regards to the technologies from a worldwide perspective. So I got the chance to read a lot about what was happening in the US, what was happening in China, in Canada, in Europe, in Russia. So trying really to understand from a global perspective. Okay, so China did this. There was this technology demonstration that happened. It was this protocol that was used. So it was demonstrated this and this. This was the kilometers that we were talking about, and yes, it's more about understanding. Okay, so having some orders of magnitude in your mind, and trying to understand also. Okay, this is from a rough perspective what I understand, and pretty once you have done this some kind of okay mapping of what are the different projects, then you go into the details, and actually the objective for us was really to understand what were the components and subsystems that were necessary for establishing a QCI. So we had to understand for each of the different protocols that you're using, what are the technologies that are underlying, and for each of the technology, trying to understand what was inside. But as you know, or as you may know, if you have done some research on the subject, it's not something that you can find right there. It's here. It's on a nice PowerPoint, a very understandable. It was very hard to find information. So I told you about stakeholder consultations that we did. So for example, every time we do a socioeconomic impact assessment, it's important to discuss with the people that have been involved in the programs. So you ask them many questions to try to understand what, for example, if the technology was used for some other applications, so that you can quantify the spillovers, or at least quantify them, qualify them. So it was we did a stakeholder consultation to really understand and to ask experts in the domains what are the things that they could share with us. And this is how, little by little, and I was working back then with a colleague of mine who was a complete fan of quantum physics. So I was very lucky here, and she was great because we were very complementary together. And yes, in the end, little by little, with time, with discussions, with errors that you make, well, it's all about trying to put in, like, writing. Whenever you and like you listen to something and you try to write it down, this is when you realize if you really understood. And trying to make things simple, if you don't understand the essence, well, it's not going to work. So it's a lot about iteration, I would say, like saying, okay, this is what I understood, so I'm going to write this down, I'm going to check if that's correct. Yes, it's correct, or no, it's not correct. And it's some sort of a cycle like this, and time after time, well, at some point you start be knowledgeable. Yes.
Yeah. I find it quite funny that it's when you're trying to understand quantum physics and you apply that iterative approach. That's what most people call the Feynman method, if you've heard of that.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And that's really cool. So what are the challenges in scaling up? I guess it's like a question for startups in particular. And like, did being at PwC help with that, or did working at Airbus?
So I actually at PwC I've been in a team that was always around 15 people. So I haven't had the chance to experience big growth, significant growth. I would say that the challenge that we are facing is actually the result of the success of and the talent of all of the people that have been working at Loft. It's because they have been great in the missions, great in finding customers, that we now have all the value proposition that I told you about: simple, reliable, fast access to space. That is a reality today. And this value proposition is so attractive that now we have a strong growth that we're experiencing. So it's great. It's fantastic. We have a 150 million contract with Earth Daily that we signed a couple of months ago to fly an entire constellation as a service. So that is fantastic. But it is true that now we have to execute, we have to deliver. And to do that, we can't do this if we're 70 people. So hiring is now one of our biggest challenge. And I would say that it's not just hiring, because it's actually about hiring A-level people, talented people, people that are committed. And something that I may not have said also about working in Loft is that working at Loft is great because we're very collaborative and we all are kind to each other. And I feel like this is completely like amazing to work in a team like that. And I would say that this is the culture that we have built at Loft Orbital that we want to keep. So we want to keep people that are smart, people that are committed, and people that are kind to each other. So I would say that this is our biggest challenge right now.
That's fantastic. And I think that's a good place to end. Thank you so much, Elisa.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for hosting me.
Talk. We learned a lot from you today, I think. Is there anything you wanted to mention? Anything? Where can people reach you? Or
yes, my email is here, my telephone is here, so please do not hesitate if you have any question, if you want to apply at some point to Loft Orbital for an internship, for a job, if you want to know more about what are because like as I told you, Loft Orbital is a software-centric company, so we're looking a lot for developers. So if you have any question as regards to the codes, the languages that we're using, or the technologies that we're using, that you can familiarize with before, so that you can also work here at Loft. Honestly, I'd be happy to answer any of the questions you may have and put you in connection with the right people here at Loft also. So thanks a lot again, Zhen, for hosting me, and it was a great pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.